Welcome back. Early voting is underway. A week from today, Democrats go to the polls to select their pick to go up against Republican James Buchanan in the special election to fill the District 72 House seat vacated by Alex Miller. It turns out that the biggest issue in the Democratic contest is what's not happening, a televised debate between Siesta Key attorney Margaret Good and her opponent, Ruta Giunneri. Giunneri accepted our offer. Good declined, so we will interview both separately on our broadcast tonight. Other issues, raising the minimum wage here in Florida, and if so, by how much? Also, health care and insider versus outsider. And joining us right now is Ruta Giunneri, and thank you and welcome to our broadcast.
Thank you very much.
What do you think is the top issue comparing yourself to Margaret Good?
Well, what I see among the voters, I've been knocking on doors for the last few weeks and actually a few months, and what I've seen is health care. Predominantly, people are saying they can't afford it, and they're looking for somebody who's going to come in and try to help them get universal health care, because they said they can't make ends meet and they can't afford rent, insurance, and food. And that's what I've been hearing on so many doors. And so I think the biggest differentiation for us right now is the healthcare debate, just because I don't think the ACA can be salvaged at all. I think, between the subsidies being taken away and everything else, it just seems like it's collapsing.
But is that something realistically a state can take on? And I am
Sure.
thinking about Massachusetts, and I know you are originally from Massachusetts, and they developed what the model for the ACA. But we're in the state of Florida right now in a legislature that is dominated both in the House and the Senate and in the governor's mansion by Republicans. So is this something that can be done?
I think it can be done, and I think what'll happen though is I think it's going to be a forced will be done. And the reason being is we're down to one single payer, like say in Sarasota, we're down to Florida Blue. If Florida Blue decides, say, mid-year next year to pull out, that will leave millions of people uninsured. And actually, if they pull out of the state and we have no insurance companies left, it's literally going to put all of us in a horrid situation of having no health insurance. At that point, the state will have to intervene and do something to give safety nets for people, because all of a sudden, if you're talking people who have been on the ACA suddenly don't have access to health care insurance in the state, you have people who have terminally ill diseases, you have people standing by for bypass surgeries, cancers, all of that. So I think if that happens, it may go to the state.
You know, you're running for the Democratic nomination right now, but this is a heavily Republican area. There are a lot of Republicans who watch this show, and when they think about the Affordable Care Act, or they think about single payer or universal health care, then their next word is socialism. And that does not really sell well in this part of Florida. What would you say to people who would basically say that?
Well, the thing that I find interesting is for anyone who has seniors, parents, grandparents who are on Medicare, they're on that one-payer system, and they can't wait to get on it. If you talk to someone who's 63, 64, they're like, oh my gosh, I have one more year and I'm going on Medicare. And they're happy when they get on Medicare, even if they need a supplement, but they're happy with that. This would just be so much simpler for everyone just to go in, go to the doctor, see the doctor, go home. You don't have to worry about paperwork, getting referrals, getting authorized by your insurance company. You go in, you get paid, and the doctors get paid, everyone gets paid, and you go home.
But it would also mean substantial tax increases at a time when the country is talking about tax decreases.
Well, the thing is, you can shift. There's money that can be shifted. I mean, we have a heavy budget on military, in proportionate to any other country. We can take that. We have Medicaid expansion dollars that can be put towards things. There's ways of juggling things that you can create more income and get that covered.
But let me ask you this, because obviously this was the center of Bernie Sanders' campaign for president, and he didn't win the nomination. So is this an idea, while some people may support, is not a winning idea even within the Democratic Party?
I think, you know what happens? I find that people are afraid of change. And The thing is, people are paying for uninsureds anyway. So if they realize that your tax dollars are paying for everyone that goes through the emergency room for a sniffle or a sore throat or a headache, instead of paying $100 to see a doctor and get amoxicillin, they end up going to the emergency room where they ring up $1,500 because all of a sudden you're getting chest x-rays and you're getting CT scans and everything that you don't need, and you're getting a bill, and we're paying that bill. So if we just, they just have to think a little bit differently.
All right, if healthcare is your number one issue, what is number two?
Livable wages is probably second, because what I'm hearing, I opened and co-founded a free medical clinic a year ago in Sarasota, and it services anyone who has no health care insurance. What I'm hearing is people walk through the door, they're not poor, they're working, they're not unemployed, they can't afford health care. And so what happens is they're making so little that they're working 2-3 jobs, they can't afford rent, they can't afford food.
All right, we're going to just take a quick pause there. We are just getting warmed up, and we'll have more on the Democratic Party's primary for House District 72 right after we check the first alert weather. Stay with us. Welcome back, and joining us once again is Ruta Gianeri, who is one of 2 Democrats seeking her party's nomination for the House District 72 special election. And we should note we are featuring the Democrats today because there's only one Republican candidate, James Buchanan, running. And hopefully, James, if you're watching this, you'll be joining us for a debate in the general election against whoever the Democratic nominee is. But Ruta, I'm going to ask you a similar question that I asked Margaret Good earlier today, and that is about your call for a $15 minimum wage. Make your case, and what is your impression in terms of your opponent's position on the minimum wage increase?
Sure. As far as what I see is people can't make it here. Rent now in Sarasota is between $1,200 and $1,500 for an apartment, never mind renting a home, and people just can't make it. And so if you look at the numbers, people are getting $8.10 minimum wage to $10. They're not being able to make their rent, so they either have to have roommates or they share, or there's no solution outside of
But
raising.
let me ask you 2 questions about that. Would $15 an hour really make much of a difference?
It's a start. You know, it would make some difference if you're making $8, if you jump to 15, it would make ends meet perhaps, where maybe they could meet rent by themselves, where now they're looking for roommates, or they can't afford to live here, so because they're making so little money, they have to commute to either Manatee or down to Port Charlotte. So,
but others would say that this would devastate small business, which many small business owners are struggling themselves just to stay in business, and having to increase the hourly wage would just, put an end to them.
Well, I've had my own business for years, and I've always compensated anyone that's worked for me generously. And the value that I get back is amazing, because you get loyalty, you get people who are on time, you get really great production out of people who are making me money. So if they weren't working, I wouldn't be making the money that I got. So I think for the small business owners, if they get workers who are going to be dedicated and not calling in sick, and because now some of the biggest things I hear complaints about are people don't show up and we can't get good help in Sarasota. Well, because the wages are too low.
Let me ask you this. Your opponent, Margaret Good, has described herself as not a pie-in-the-sky candidate and somebody who wants to be able to get what is able to get done in Tallahassee. That kind of seems like she is saying, whether it's minimum wage or health care, single payer, that your ideas here are pie in the sky.
Well, the thing is, everything that I've wanted to do, I've done. So whether it's create my own company that hires veterans, or open a medical clinic for the uninsureds, I've achieved that. And so what I see now for everybody, the need, and those were needs, so I filled those needs. What I'm seeing now for needs are a higher salary for people, and I am seeing a need for health care.
We have less than a minute left, but I want to get your take in terms of the status of the Democratic Party right now. Many Democrats believe there's a golden opportunity right now because of the national mood. On the other hand, there's a split between the progressives and mainstream Democrats, which some people say is really not taking advantage in terms of the messaging of the party right now. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm new to politics, so when I stepped in, I'm obviously a progressive based on my stances of $15 and universal health care. It's one party. It is the Democratic Party, and I stand with the Democratic Party. I mean, we're still for Planned Parenthood. We're still for no fracking in Florida. The things that are basics, we're still for. There are some things that we may vary on, but we're still one party, and I think we just need to unite.
Okay, and we will have to leave it there.
Okay.
Thank you very much
Thank
for joining
you.
us. We have to take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back, and joining us now is Margaret Good. Good is an attorney on Siesta Key. Like her opponent, this is her first try for elective office. Unlike her opponent, she has demonstrated an impressive ability to raise money. She is passionate about public education in Florida, and while her opponent puts her progressive positions front and center, Good says she is not, quote, a pie-in-the-sky person and wants to get things done in Tallahassee. And joining us now is Margaret Good, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Alan.
It's my pleasure. I guess the first thing I want to ask about, and it's we got to ask about it, is we wanted to do a debate on this broadcast. We feel it's the best way for voters, Democrats, Independents, Republicans to see two candidates side by side making their case. Why didn't you want to debate your opponent, Ruda, on this broadcast?
You know, Alan, I have debated my opponent across the district in venues large and small in front of diverse audiences. And at this point in the campaign, my goal is to talk one-on-one to voters about my unifying vision for Florida of what's good for public education, what's good for our families, what's good for our environment.
But this would be the best opportunity to reach the most people rather than going to venues that you may get anywhere from 20 or more people. This is the way to get everybody who lives in this district and is registered to vote to see both of you side by side.
Like I said, I'm at this point in the campaign, I am working on unifying the voters behind what's good for Florida, what's good for our economy, what's good for public education.
But don't you also have to demonstrate how you would go up to Tallahassee and debate your Republican opponents up there and show leadership and demonstrate it by how you debate the issues of facing Florida and facing your constituents?
I look forward to going to Tallahassee and fighting tooth and nail for this district. I am the right person for this job. I am going to work hard in Tallahassee to make sure that Sarasota is well represented.
Do you want to debate James Buchanan on television in the general election if you win the primary?
I would welcome the opportunity.
But how do you make that case to Mr. Buchanan, who has himself given indications that he is not willing to debate whoever the Democratic winner is, if you don't debate on television your Democratic opponent?
Well, at this point in the campaign, we're 7 days from the primary. If Mr. Buchanan wants to debate, I would welcome it. But right now in the campaign, I am focusing on talking to voters one by one and on sharing my vision to unify the Democratic Party.
Okay, let's talk about some of the other issues here. One of the issues that seems to have basically had both you and your opponent talking about is whether or not to raise the minimum wage in Florida, and if so, by how much. Your opponent has come out in terms of the $15 an hour movement, which a lot of people in the progressive wing of your party support. You have not committed to a $15 an hour minimum wage. Aspirationally, would you like to see a $15 minimum wage?
Well, working people in Florida and in Sarasota have gotten the short end of the stick. The current minimum wage in Florida is $8.10 an hour. That is not enough to live on. If you're working full-time and making $8.10, you can't survive. We need to increase the minimum wage in Florida. But I want to be mindful of small businesses and our local economy, and I want to make sure that we're doing not just what's best for workers, but we also make sure that we are creating an economy that thrives.
So if we're not talking about hurting small businesses, set a dollar an hour in terms of what you would support. Do you aspire that it would be $15 an hour, $11, $9? Give us a number.
I want to talk to the stakeholders. I want to make sure that the workers have a voice in how much the minimum wage should be. I want to make sure that the small business owners have an opportunity to talk about what they can afford and what they can shoulder. I want to bring everyone together and figure out what's going to be best for Florida.
Finally, when you're talking about the minimum wage and the state legislature, you have a state House and state Senate and the governor's office that are dominated by Republicans. What are the chances that even one more Democrat asking for an increase in the minimum wage would get anywhere in the climate that's in Tallahassee right now?
Well, you got to try. I mean, this is such an important issue for Floridians, for working people in Florida, and I think that there's some movement there. You see Target going to $15 an hour. There's places, there's businesses that want to see an increase in the minimum wage and want to take care of their workers. I think we need to capitalize on that.
What indication, and we only have about 30 seconds left in this segment, that Richard Corcoran, the Speaker of the House, is very fiscally conservative, would go along with any kind of raise in the minimum wage?
Well, you know, what we need to do first is get some reasonable people elected to office. In February, we have an opportunity to do that. And then in November of 2018, hopefully we'll get some more.
Okay. We are going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Margaret Good in just a moment. Stay with us.